On the 17th of June, 2009, two British tourists, Rhys Williams and Bradley Cawthon, had gone missing whilst vacationing on the east coast of South Africa. The two young men had come to the country to watch the British Lions rugby team play the world champions, South Africa. Although their last known whereabouts were in the city of Durban, according to their families in the UK, the boys were last known to be on their way to the centre of the KwaZulu-Natal province, 260 kilometres away, to explore the abandoned tourist site of the Battle of Rorke's Drift. When authorities carried out a full investigation into the Rorke's Drift area, they would eventually find evidence of the boys' disappearance. Near the banks of a tributary river, a torn Wales rugby shirt belonging to Rhys Williams was located. 2 kilometres away, nestled in the brush by the side of a back road, searchers would then find a damaged video camera, only for forensics to later confirm DNA belonging to both Rhys Williams and Bradley Cawthon. Although the video camera was badly damaged, authorities were still able to salvage footage from the device. Footage that showed the whereabouts of both Rhys and Bradley on the 17th of June, the day they were thought to go missing. This is the story of what happened to them prior to their disappearance. Located in the centre of the KwaZulu-Natal province, the famous battle site of Rorke's Drift is better known to South Africans as an abandoned and supposedly haunted tourist attraction. The area of the battle saw much bloodshed in the year 1879, in which less than 200 British soldiers garrisoned at a small outpost fought off an army of 4,000 fierce Zulu warriors. In the late 90s, to commemorate this battle, the grounds of the old outpost were turned into a museum and tourist centre. Accompanying this, a hotel lodge had begun construction 4 kilometres away. But during the building of the hotel, several construction workers on the site would mysteriously go missing. Over a 3-month period, 5 construction workers in total had vanished. When authorities searched the area, only 2 of the original 5 missing workers were found. What was found was their remains. Located only a kilometre or so apart, these remains appeared to have been savaged by wild animals. A few weeks after the finding of their bodies, construction on the hotel continued. 2 more workers would soon disappear, only to be found, again, scavenged by wild animals. Because of these deaths and disappearances, investors brought a permanent halt to the hotel's construction, as well as to the opening of the nearby Rorke's Drift Museum. To this day, both the Rorke's Drift Tourist Centre and Hotel Lodge remain abandoned. On 17th of June 2009, Rhys Williams and Bradley Cawthon had driven nearly 4 hours from Durban to the Rorke's Drift area. They were now driving on a long, narrow dirt road, which cut through the wide grass plains. The scenery around the plains appears very barren, dispersed only by thin, solitary trees, and unlooked from the distance by faraway hills. Further down the road, the pair passed several isolated shanty farms and traditional thatched roof huts. Although people clearly resided here, as along this route they had already passed 2 small fields containing cattle, they saw no inhabitants whatsoever. 10 minutes later, up the bending road, they finally reached the entrance of the abandoned tourist centre. Getting out of their jeep for hire, they make their way through the entrance towards the museum building, nestled on the base of a large hill. Approaching the abandoned centre, what they see is an old stone building exposed by weathered white paint and a red, rust-eaten roof supported by old wooden pillars. Entering the porch of the building, they find that the walls to each side of the door are displayed with 5 wooden tribal masks, each depicting a predatory animal-like face. At first glance, Both Reese and Bradley believe this to have originally been part of the tourist center. But as Reese further inspects the masks, he realizes the wood they're made from appears to be far younger, speculating that they were put there only recently. Upon trying to enter, they quickly realize the door to the museum is locked. Handing over the video camera to Reese, Bradley approaches the door to try and kick it open. Although Reese is heard shouting at him to stop, after several attempts, Bradley successfully manages to break open the door. Furious at Bradley for committing forced entry, Reese reluctantly joins him inside the museum. The boys enter inside of a large and very dark room. Now holding the video camera, Bradley follows behind Reese, leading the way with a flashlight. Exploring the room, they come across numerous things. Along the walls, they find a print of an old 19th century painting of the Rorke's Drift battle, a poster for the 1964 film Zulu, and an inauthentic Isilangu war shield. In the center of the room, on top of a long table, they stand over a miniature of the Rorke's Drift battle, in which small figurines of Zulu warriors besiege the outpost, defended by a handful of British soldiers. Heading towards the back of the room, the boys are suddenly startled. Shining the flashlight against the back wall, the light reveals 3 mannequins dressed in redcoat uniforms, worn by the British soldiers at Rorke's Drift. It is apparent from the footage that both Reese and Bradley are made uncomfortable by these mannequins, the faces of which appear ghostly in their stiffness. Feeling as though they had seen enough, the boys then decide to exit the museum. Back outside the porch, the boys make their way down towards a tall, white stone structure. Upon reaching it, the structure is revealed to be a memorial for the soldiers who died during the battle. Reese, seemingly interested in the memorial, studies down the list of names. Taking the video camera from Bradley, Reese films up close to one name in particular. The name he finds reads Williams, J. From what we hear of the boys' conversation, Private John Williams was apparently Reese's 4-time great-grandfather. Leaving a wreath of red poppies down by the memorial, the boys then make their way back to the Jeep, before heading down the road from which they came. 20 minutes later, down a dirt trail, they stop outside the abandoned grounds of the Rorke's Drift Hotel Lodge. Located at the base of the Sinkindi Mountain, the hotel consists of 3 circular orange buildings, topped with thatched roofs. Now walking among the grounds of the hotel, the cracked pavement has given way to vegetation. The windows of the 3 buildings have been boarded up, and the thatched roofs have already begun to fall apart. Now approaching the larger of the 3 buildings, the pair are alerted to something the footage cannot see. From the unsteady footage, the silhouette of a young boy, no older than 10, can now be seen hiding amongst the shade. Realizing they're not alone on these grounds, Reese calls out, "Hello," to the boy. Seemingly frightened, the young boy comes out of hiding, only to run away behind the curve of the building. Although they originally planned on exploring the hotel's interior, it appears this young boy's presence was enough for the 2 to just call it a day. Heading back towards their Jeep, the sounds of Reese's voice can be heard bellowing, as he runs over to one of the vehicle's front tires. Bradley soon joins him, camera in hand, to find out that every one of the Jeep's tires has been emptied of air, and, upon further inspection, the boys find multiple stab holes in each of them. Realizing someone must have slashed their tires whilst they explored the hotel grounds, the pair search frantically around the Jeep for evidence. What they find is a trail of small bare footprints leading away into the bush. Footprints appearing to belong to a young child, no older than the boy they had just seen on the grounds. Initially believing this boy to be the culprit, they soon realized this wasn't possible, as the boy would have had to be in two places at once. Further theorizing the scene, they concluded that the young boy they saw may well have been acting as a decoy, while another carried out the act before disappearing into the brush, now leaving the two of them stranded. With no phone signal in the area to call for help, Reese and Bradley were left panicking over what they should do next. Without any other options, the pair realized they had to walk back on foot up the trail to try and find help from one of the shanty farms. However, the day had already turned to evening, and Bradley refused to be outside this area after dark. Arguing over what they were going to do, the boys decided they would sleep in the Jeep overnight, and by morning, they would walk to one of the shanty farms and find help. As the day drew closer to midnight, the boys had been inside their Jeep for hours. The outside night was so dark by now that they couldn't see a single shred of scenery, accompanied only by dead silence. To distract themselves from how anxious they both felt, Reese and Bradley talked about numerous subjects, from their lives back home in the UK to who they thought would win the upcoming rugby game that they were now probably going to miss. Later on, the footage quickly resumes, and among the darkness inside the Jeep, a pair of bright vehicle headlights are now shining through the windows. Unsure of who this is, the boys ask each other what they should do. Trying to stay hidden out of fear, they then hear someone get out of the vehicle and shut the door. Whoever this unseen individual is, they are now shouting in the direction of the boys' Jeep. Hearing footsteps approach, Reese quickly tells Bradley to turn off the camera. Again, the footage is turned back on, and the pair appear to be inside the very vehicle that had pulled up behind them. Although it is too dark to see much of anything, the vehicle is clearly moving. Reese is heard up front in the passenger seat, talking to whoever is driving. The unknown driver speaks in English, with a very strong South African accent. From the sound of his voice, the driver appears to be a Caucasian male, ranging anywhere from his late 50s to mid-60s. Although they have a hard time understanding him, the boys tell the man they're in South Africa for the British and Irish Lions tour, and that they came to Rorke's Drift so that Reese could pay respects to his 4-time great-grandfather. Later on in the conversation, Bradley asks the driver if the stories about the hotel's missing construction workers are true. The driver appears to scoff at this, saying it's just a made-up story. According to the driver, the 7 workers had died in a freak accident while the hotel was being built, and their families had sued the investors into bankruptcy. From the way the voices sound, Bradley is hiding the camera very discreetly. Although hard to hear over the noise of the moving vehicle, Reese asks the driver if they are far from the next town, in which the driver responds that it won't be too long now. After some moments of silence, the driver asks the boys if either of them wants to pull over to relieve themselves. Both of the boys say they can wait, but rather suspiciously, the driver keeps on insisting that they should pull over now. Then, almost suddenly, the driver appears to pull to a screeching halt. Startled by this, the boys ask the driver what is wrong, before the sound of their own yelling is loudly heard. Amongst the boys' panicked yells, the driver shouts at them to get out of the vehicle. Although the audio after this is very distorted, one of the boys can be heard shouting the words, "Don't shoot us." After further rummaging of the camera in Bradley's possession, the boys exit the vehicle to the sound of the night air and closing of vehicle doors. As soon as they're outside, the unidentified man drives away, leaving Reese and Bradley by the side of a dirt trail. The pair shout after him, begging him not to leave them in the middle of nowhere. But amongst the outside darkness, all the footage shows are the taillights of the vehicle slowly fading away into the distance. When the footage is eventually turned back on, we can hear Reese and Bradley walking through the darkness. All we see are the feet and bottom legs of Reese along the dirt trail, visible only by his flashlight. From the tone of the boys' voices, they are clearly terrified, having no idea where they are or even what direction they're heading in. Some time seems to pass, and the boys are still walking along the dirt trail through the darkness. Still working the camera, Bradley is audibly exhausted. The boys keep talking to each other, hoping to soon find any shred of civilization, when suddenly, Reese tells Bradley to be quiet. In the silence of the dark, quiet night air, a distant noise is only just audible. Both of the boys hear it. The sounds appear to be rummaging of some kind. In a quiet tone, Reese tells Bradley that something is moving out in the brush on the right side of the trail. Believing this to be wild animals and hoping they're not predatory, the boys continue concernedly along the trail. However, as they keep walking, the sound eventually comes back and is now audibly closer. Whatever the sound is, it is clearly coming from more than one animal. Unaware what animals even roam this area, the boys start moving at a faster pace, but the sound seems to follow them and can clearly be heard moving closer. Picking up the pace even more, the sound of rummaging through the brush transitions into something else. What is heard, alongside the heavy breaths and footsteps of the boys, is the sound of animalistic whining and cackling. The audio becomes distorted for a minute, before the boys seemingly come to a halt. By each other's side, the audio comes back to normal, and Reese, barely visible by his flashlight, frantically yells at Bradley that they're no longer on the trail. Searching the ground drastically, the boys begin to panic, but the sound of the rummaging soon returns to them, alongside the whines and cackles. Again the footage distorts, but through the darkness of the surrounding night, more than a dozen small lights are picked up, seemingly from all directions. 20 or so meters away, it does not take long for the boys to realize that the lights are actually eyes. Eyes belonging to a pack of clearly predatory animals. All we see now from the footage are the many blinking eyes staring towards the two boys. The whines continue frantically, audibly excited, and as the seconds pass, the sound of these animals becomes ever louder, gaining towards them. The continued whines and cackles become so loud that the footage again becomes distorted, before cutting out for a final time. To this day, more than a decade later, the remains of both Reese Williams and Bradley Cawthon have yet to be found. From the evidence described in the footage, authorities came to the conclusion that whatever these animals were, they had been responsible for both of the boys' disappearances. But why the bodies of the boys have yet to be found still remains a mystery. Zoologists who reviewed the footage determined that the whines and cackles could only have come from one species known to South Africa: African wild dogs. What further supports this assessment is that when the remains of the construction workers were autopsied back in the 90s, teeth marks left by the scavengers were also identified as belonging to African wild dogs. However, this only leaves more questions than answers. Although there are African wild dogs in the KwaZulu-Natal province, particularly at the Xihluwi-Mfolozi Game Reserve, no populations whatsoever of African wild dogs have been known to roam around the Rorke Drift area. In fact, there are no more than 650 wild dogs left in South Africa. So how a pack of these animals have managed to roam undetected around the Rorke Drift area for 2 decades has only baffled zoologists and experts alike. As for the mystery driver who left the boys to their fate, a full investigation was carried out to find them. Upon interviewing several farmers and residents around the area, authorities could not find a single person who matched what they knew of the driver's description, confirmed by Reese and Bradley in the footage, a late 50 to mid-60-year-old Caucasian male. When these residents were asked if they knew a man of this description, every one of them gave the same answer. There were no white men known to live in or around the Rorke Drift area. Upon releasing details of the footage to the public, many theories have been acquired over the years, both plausible and extravagant. The most plausible theory is that whoever this mysterious driver was, he had helped the local residents of Rorke Drift in abducting the 7 construction workers before leaving their bodies to the scavengers. If this theory is to be believed, then the purpose of this crime may have been to bring a halt to any plans for tourism in the area. When it comes to Rhys Williams and Bradley Cawthon, 2 British tourists, it's believed the same operation was carried out on them, leaving the boys to die in the wilderness and later disposing of the bodies. Although this may have been the most plausible theory, several ends are still left untied. If the bodies were disposed of, why did they leave Rhys's rugby shirt? More importantly, why did they leave the video camera with this footage? If the unknown driver or the Rorke Drift residents were responsible for the boys' disappearances, surely they wouldn't have left any clear evidence of the crime. One of the more outlandish theories, and one particularly intriguing to paranormal communities, is that Rorke Drift is haunted by the spirits of the Zulu warriors who died in the battle. Spirits that take on the form of wild animals, forever trying to rid their enemies from their land. In order to appease these spirits, theorists have suggested that the residents may have abducted outsiders, only to leave them to the fate of the spirits. Others have suggested that the residents are themselves shapeshifters, and when outsiders come to disturb their way of life, they transform into predatory animals and kill them. Despite the many theories as to what happened to Rhys Williams and Bradley Cawthon, the circumstances of their deaths and disappearances remain a mystery to this day. The culprits involved are yet to be identified, whether that be human, animal, or something else. We may never know what really happened to these boys, and just like the many dark mysteries of the world, we may never know what evil still lies inside of Rorke Drift, South Africa. Hello everybody, and thank you for watching. I know this is a little different to the end of videos that you're used to, but I wanted to try something a little different, especially since this story in particular struck a chord with me, as I myself have been to Ishlui Imfolozi National Park. In fact, here is my proof. I volunteered there with the African wild dogs, or painted dogs like Aeon Pictus, and many of the other species there, doing conservation work with Wildlife Act. In fact, here's more evidence. My wall of African things. This was sustainably sourced. I did not kill this myself. It was, it's something that the indigenous people do to support themselves, and then they sell on the pelts to tourists. I thought I'd just get one to remember my time there, and it's a sustainable practice. But regardless, I wanted to mention the fact that the animals in this were suggested to be painted dogs. Now, interestingly enough, having experience with painted dogs in the region, I can tell you that they are the least dangerous apex predator I've ever come across in my life. I've stood right before an entire pack of these animals, and they have kept their distance. And when I walked towards them, they moved away. They left the vicinity. It's a very interesting thing to be able to do that to an apex predator, but humans are quite a dangerous species. So, important to keep that in mind. And as an ecologist, as a zoologist and animal expert, I have 2 degrees in the field, I can tell you that from the descriptions in the story, if this is a true story, the animals sound a lot more like hyenas, as opposed to painted dogs, which have a chirping sound, whereas the cackling sound, which sounds like laughter, is more akin to spotted hyenas, which would also explain why there are no bodies left behind, as hyenas are the only animal in Africa, except for crocodiles, that can fully consume a human corpse, as they can break the bones. Not even lions can do this. So, food for thought. Interesting. And whilst this region is not known to have either of the species roaming in the wild, they are usually relegated to the caged-in national parks, which in my mind is kind of sad. They should be able to roam throughout the country, but regardless, I thought I'd give my 2 cents on the matter, as it's my area of expertise. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and that's David Attenborough, in case you were wondering. But what do you think happened? Sorry for my rudeness in not asking before. Do you think it was painted dogs? Do you think it was hyenas? Do you think it was the spirits reincarnated of the Zulu warriors that were unfortunately massacred over there? Or do you think it was shapeshifters or some other supernatural thing that took place? Please let me know down below. I personally think this was all made up. Anyway, have a good day, guys.